Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I created these bubble coasters. This was a technique that I saw months ago on a reel somewhere. Don't remember who made it, and I thought I would try my hand at it. So I'm using moss epoxy tabletop. You've got two parts here. You mix equal parts of each one and then stir it for 3 minutes. So I've already done this just to save some of the monotony, and I'm dotting it in my coaster molds. Now, when I started doing this, I was getting some little strings, and I'll show you once I've got all my dots in there how to clean up after yourself if you happen to get that as well. So I've got a little skewer here that I'm using, and I'm twisting it to make sure that that resin doesn't drop before I want it to drop. And I found this was a good way to kind of control how big or how small my dots were going to be. Now, they don't need to be perfectly circular. It's meant to kind of look like water drops on a windowsill, or that's how I took it anyways. So they're not necessarily going to be completely perfectly circular. So you're going to keep doing your bubbles as much or as little as you want. And I like to make them smaller and bigger sizes, like all different sizes. So I started with the bigger ones, and then I went and filled in with the smaller ones once I've got the bigger ones that I wanted where I wanted. Now, word of warning, I did put some against the side, but they kind of migrated and all joined together, and I didn't really like that look. So I'll show you in a little bit how to fix that or how to remove them. Now, I'm curious if I had a coaster mold that had like if it was completely circular and not jagged the way that the most mold that I am using is, that might not have happened. I'm not sure, but I will test that at some point in the future. The other option or the other possibility is that I have a shower curtain on my surface here that has been folded and unfolded many, many times. So it's not completely flat, and I don't think that helped with the bubbles migrating around the edge. Now, I keep doing this over and over again until I have it filled how much I want. I do have this sped up, so I'm doing it fairly slowly, and I'm trying to be as careful as possible with this. If I wanted a bubble to be a little bit bigger, I did take my skewer and I put it in there and kind of in a circular motion made it larger. They don't need to be they can be really flat, that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that your bubbles are as big or as little as you want. And be careful not to put them too close together because they will start to join each other. And if that's not the look that you're going for, then you won't have much control over that. Once you have as many bubbles as you want, you're going to let it cure completely, and I let it cure completely overnight. Now, when you mix resin, it naturally gets little bubbles in it. You'll want to pop those, and you can use a heat tool with it, or I just sprayed it with some isopropyl alcohol to release the tension and remove those bubbles. If you have any strings or whatever that have gotten on your mold, you can use a Q-tip with some isopropyl alcohol and just clean that off before anything has cured. Now here I'm making some tiny bubbles with a toothpick and the resin. I actually don't recommend doing this because a lot of them didn't show up, and the ones that did show up, they kind of look like air bubbles in the resin. They don't look like the look of the rest of them. So I would kind of warn not to do that. Now this is the next morning, so any of those bubbles that have joined together around the outside, I am removing. I thought I removed them all, but I clearly missed a couple, and you'll see that in the finished product, and you'll see it when I'm putting the powder on it. Once I have my molds exactly how I want them, I'm going to use some color shifting micas, and I'm going to brush them into the mold with a soft brush. Now I have a set from Chameleon. There's 8 micas in the set, and I couldn't decide which colors I wanted to do for these coasters, so I ended up doing kind of a rainbow stripy look because I thought it might look a little bit different and pretty. In hindsight, some of the colors are a little bit out of order, so I've got a couple green-ish looking stripes where I wouldn't necessarily have put them, but that's okay. This was just a fun project to do, and I actually really like the rainbow look of it. But with color shifting mica, sometimes they look a little bit different than they look in the bottle, so you just have to be a little bit careful for this. So I'm putting them in a striped order across my mold, and I'm using 6 of the 8 colors that I have in my set. You could use as many or as few as you want. You could even just use one. It doesn't necessarily have to be all or a bunch of different colors. You could even use a bunch of different colors and just have splotches of color rather than stripes of color like I'm doing here. That would look really, really cool too. I love the color shifting micas because the color that they shift to sometimes is a little bit unexpected. So it creates a really unique look. And when you do the next step that we're going to do, it really highlights those micas and really makes them shine. So they're not transparent, you don't see through them, you just see the top part of it and the bubbly texture to it, and it looks really, really cool. These look especially neat when you put them out in the sunlight. I didn't have a nice clean place to shoot somewhere outside, so I didn't actually take a shot of them outside, but they do look really, really cool. I'll list the color order of the micas that I used in the description down below, as well as all the other supplies I've used. This color that I'm putting on now is my absolute favorite in the whole set. It's called Galaxy, and I absolutely love it. It's got a bit of a purple tone to it, but there's like pinkish bluish flecks in there. I'm using a fluffy brush for the mica powders that I usually use for perfect pearls. It doesn't really matter what brush you use, as long as it's something that can hold those micas in order to transfer them to the mold and brush them around. Even probably a makeup brush would work, or even like one of those sponge makeup applicators would probably work. You just want something that you can take a decent amount of the mica powders in order to spread them around, and you want to get a good coverage on your mold. My particular mold here, they didn't go up the side of the mold, and that's totally fine. It doesn't necessarily need to. You just want to be able to brush them on there. They do kind of cling to the mold, which is handy when you're doing this. You want to make sure that they're staying where you're putting them. And now we're on to the last color. And like I said, any colors will work. It ends up looking a little bit, as I'm looking at it right now on the video, it kind of looks a little bit like a planet, which is really cool looking. And any color or any type of mica will work. I especially love these color shifting ones, but I have a love for color shifting anything. So once I've got my mica on there, I'm putting some black paint in my mixed resin here. Now I got lazy and mixed my resin in a small container, thinking that I may possibly have enough, but I don't. I only have about 1/3 of what I needed, so I'm going to need to make some more. But I'm going to put a layer of resin in the bottom here. When you use paint to color your resin, you want to make sure that you're not using more than 10% of the amount of the resin. If you use too much paint, it's going to not cure properly. I like to use the golden paints that are in the tube because they're nice and thick. They've got a lot of pigment to them, and I don't need to use a whole lot to color my resin. So while that is flattening out, I mix a whole nother batch so that I have enough to fill my coaster molds. You want to make sure that you have enough to fill them to the top. They only need to be to the top, and then you're going to let that completely cure before you unmold them. Now, just like the bubbles, before I let my resin cure, I'm going to spray with isopropyl alcohol to release the bubbles from the top. You could also use a heat tool. And I don't do that for about every 15 minutes for the first hour or two. Once you see no more bubbles or raising to the top, you can stop doing it. You don't need to do any more. This is the next morning, so we can take the coasters out of the mold. And doesn't that look cool? It just looks like I don't know, it looks like a planet. I just love how the color shifting micas look on there. And it totally looks like bubble drops on there. See, that's one of the ones on this side there that I missed taking off, but that's okay. I really don't think video shows off how pretty these Chameleon micas are in person. And the cool thing was when the black paint was curing, the excess mica that had floated to the top, it almost looked like fireworks on the back, which was really, really fun. So to clean your resin cups, here is the easiest way I found. There's always a little bit of a disc of dried resin or cured resin that goes at the bottom. I take some duct tape, I cut a piece off, and I wrap it around my fingers with the sticky side facing out, and then I just press that into the cup, and sometimes I'll even squeeze the cup around my hand, and that will help remove all of those resin little drops that dry inside there, and that can be tossed out, that tape, once you're completely done. I like to make sure to clean all my cups before I put them away so that next time I have a project, I have clean cups ready to use, and this is the quickest and easiest way that I've found. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed watching the project. Have a great day.